Joining me now to go through the papers is Alex Petropoulos, political commentator with Young Voices UK. Alex, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Rosie. It's nice to be here.
Shall we talk about the Atlantic Declaration, the trip that the Prime Minister had? Because there has been a fairly bruising write-up, I think we could say, by Quentin Letts inside the Times this morning that said, Rishi let Grandpa Joe hog the limelight. What did you make of it?
You know, to be honest, going into all of this, going into Rishi's trip to the US, I had a low bar. I didn't think it was going to go that well. And to be honest, I've been pleasantly surprised with the results of his meeting with Joe Biden and with all of the announcements that have come out of it. You know, when we look at what we can expect to get out of the US, we have to be realistic and we have to say, look, this is a US president who pretty much promised protectionism. So anything we can draw out of that with regards to economic promises is a win. And most of all, the thing that has been hinted at all week in various papers that has now been finally formalized and announced is all of these new commitments towards AI safety, a commitment to a conference, and the US being on board and sort of embracing the UK as being a leader on this front are all things that I think are massive wins, and I'm very glad that have happened.
What do you make of the two's relationship? How special, as we're always led to believe, actually is it?
Yeah, well, you know, this is going to be the third special relationship that Joe Biden will have dealt with in his term, 3 different UK prime ministers. I do think that Joe Biden is a very pragmatic politician. And I think that he is, at the end of the day, not quite a diplomat, but he is very much on board with the idea of working with allies, which is far away from what can be said about the previous US president. And so I think that genuinely he does believe in maintaining strong relationships and working with his allies.
Well, we've analysed a little bit with Terry about how specifically that trip went. Should we talk about politics a bit closer to home that have been really frustrating the current Prime Minister, and that is the constant headline generator that is Boris Johnson. And he may be spared a by-election. That's what the Telegraph is reporting on the front page. Why so? Well,
yeah, you know, if Boris Johnson is anything, he is a political animal. And he is always the politician I think of when I think of no politician could possibly escape this now. And then you look at Boris Johnson and you say, well, yeah, maybe actually he could. And, you know, the committee that's looking into these Partygate investigations has said that, you know, Boris Johnson won't have to sort of have all this new evidence presented against him. That being said, ministers within this committee are being told that they're free to vote, which for me is a really promising thing because it ensures that we actually have some accountability. And I think that's what most people want out of this whole Partygate investigation after investigation after investigation is they want a sense that Boris Johnson is being held to account and they want a sense that he's not being let off easily.
Yeah, the MPs have sort of been examining whether the former Prime Minister misled the Commons over his insistence there hadn't been parties in Downing Street during lockdown. I mean, they could recommend that he gets suspended from Parliament for more than 10 days. If Boris Johnson does end up facing a by-election in his seat, which he may now avoid because that would be one of the more harsher punishments delivered to him, how do you think he'd actually fare?
I had a glance at the polls and it does look like he has the margin just barely. But, you know, it's for a politician that was as popular, for a politician that was as adored and seemingly untouchable by many, that margin is incredibly close. And so it really comes down to, it's Labour's election to lose in that sense within that particular seat. And that's the national story that we would be telling there.
Let's talk about what's happening at the BBC. There is some reporting inside the Times that's saying one of the BBC bulletins that would have been aired, the news bulletins, was shot 3 hours earlier than it was actually broadcast. And the reason this happened is because staff were on strike. How do you see that the situation currently facing its particularly local BBC broadcasters? How much value do you think they provide? And is it, are you in the category of people that say this is a real concern that we're cutting down on our local news output?
I'm a very strong proponent of local news, and I'm a very strong proponent of the BBC in general. I think that it provides a great service. I think that it could also succeed in a private capacity if it wanted to. But I think that the reality of the situation it's been presented with is that it's, I was going to say suffering death by 1,000 cuts, but it's really death by a few cuts, in that it hasn't been given a fighting chance. We've sort of taken the decision that we're going to slowly bleed the BBC dry, where it has to be forced to make these difficult decisions and forced to make decisions it really doesn't want to. And either supporting it fully and giving it the funding it really needs, or biting that bullet if you really want to, say, privatize the BBC, actually give it a fighting chance.
In the meantime, how important do you think it is that when they're trying to run a service with strikes on, that there is a bit more transparency that, say, if they bring you the news at 10 o'clock that was actually recorded at 7 o'clock, maybe they should tell you?
Does
it matter?
In a way it does, but in a way this is the BBC almost catching up to a lot of what existing publications do anyway. Journalism is in a very tight spot at the moment, and finding ways to, I won't say cut corners, but finding ways to be more efficient is the name of the game. And lots of different shows do pre-records and then incorporate those into the news. But you're right that
it's just not normally the news that's pre-recorded.
Yeah,
it might be the programmes are.
Yeah, there should be some small declaration somewhere at some point, maybe.
Yeah, by its definition, it has to be new, you would expect. In the Mail, there are these photographs that lots of the papers are carrying them, and we're going to be looking at what's happening in the weather this weekend after 5:30. But the Mail, I thought this summed it up, the day the Big Apple turned into the Big Orange. I mean, the photographs are absolutely incredible. They look dystopian because the sky is a tangerine colour. It's a real concern for people who are living there, but it looks pretty menacing.
Yeah, I thought it was promotional material for the new Dune movie or something. It is very worrying, and I've lived in a country that has dealt with forest fires in the past, and it's incredibly scary when you have smoke arriving on your doorstep and you don't know if the thing that you don't think about ever is the quality of the air you breathe in. And it's something that you have no effect and no control over unless you wear a mask. But even then, it's something that is so intangible and out of your reach, and it's something that really you need political solutions for. And so hopefully this will act as a lever, as a push, a wake-up call for people to sort of realize, okay, this is something that we really need to treat seriously. These are concrete impacts of climate change at our doorstep finally. And looking from far away, we should definitely not get cozy. I know the weather was really nice over the last few weeks, but this could easily be us. It's
because of the forest fires blazing in Canada, and so sort of free masks were being distributed in New York because the air quality was declared to be at its worst since the 1960s. We're going to be checking in with Jim Dale, the meteorologist, in about 15 minutes' time. Alex, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to go through the papers with you, a political commentator at Young Voices UK.